Yo, what's going on YouTube? This is Broman Clash right here, and I want to talk about a topic, and it's not about race, but it does have some aspect in it, and it's going to talk about the concept of history and how the way people tend to repeat history unknowingly if they don't, understand it or even know what the hell is going on. Because if you look at history and how the way people tend to repeat it, they tend to repeat it in very funny intervals. They first say, "Oh, it's not going to happen because it's not going to happen to us." Okay, if you see it happen to another people, and just like what Dr. King once said, injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. Now, take that quote with a grain of salt, especially with Dr. King saying, an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. Now, how does this tie in with people unintentionally repeating history? See, look, now, if you look at your history and all the killings and all the stuff and all, brilliant matters of the mind that happened, especially with the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, and, science being created from the first civilizations, and you realize that with bad things come good things. But the real sad part is the fact that people tend to ignore history because they think it's too outdated. Oh, it's too geekish. Oh, why would anybody want to learn about history? It's so boring. Well, let me tell you something. Look at yourself, look at me, and look at everyone else. You know what we all have in common? We live, we breathe, we fight, we struggle, we thrive, and then eventually we die. We are living history. That's the thing. And some of you may say that, what does living history got to do with history in general? Because, history in general deals with a topic of being mindful of certain things. And once you are mindful of certain things, you realize that, hey, you got to watch out for certain signs. See, some of these signs may include like people ignoring obvious obviously like false allegations, and then looking at it like, wait a minute, this seems so familiar, yet it's just with a new face. What the hell is going on? And that's the thing. But yet the funniest thing is the fact that there are false prophets. And I know I'm not much of a Bible reader, nor I'm not like, the kind of guy that would use verses, because I don't really know much verses myself, man. I'm gonna be honest, because I don't read the Bible, but there are certain verses in that book that will teach you that, hey, look, beware of false prophets, astrological signs, and fortune tellers, because maybe you think that, oh, they are evil or they are like works of demonic structure. No, the reason why they say, watch out for those kind of people, because you built a reliance on them as opposed to building a reliance on yourself. See, now, throughout history, people have been known to misinterpret and to try to comfort their own sins. And it's not so far fetched that you will see it in today's time, especially, with nowadays with people looking at, the latest technology. Hey, I know I'm not the one to talk because I'm thinking about getting a new 3DS myself. Hey, I admit it, I'm a game head. But at the same time, you have to remember this. People are naturally indulgent creatures. We're naturally indulgent, a naturally indulgent species. And the funny thing about, the human species is the fact that we are brilliant, but at the same time, we are arrogant. Because we have enough brain power to build amazing structures, but yet we are arrogant enough to ignore history and its mistakes. But the real funny part is the fact that, what does this got to do with history in the first place? Especially when you look back, especially during like Europe's dark ages, middle ages, during a time that they did not have much innovation. They were scared of religious people who were abusing power. And how does this tie in with today's times? Especially when you have people who abuse their own status, who abuse their own power, abuse their own authority, just so they can feel power themselves. But you know what happens when people when people, abuse their power, right? They often get knocked off, killed, run off their own land. Hey, even in public execution. I want to bring those things back because seriously, I mean, I don't know my history and it ain't nothing new. But when you look at history and how the way it ties in all together, because I remember this from a lecture that time is not a straight line, it's a circle. And take that with a grain of salt, because if time is a circle, you will realize that what happened in the past can happen in the present, thus can happen in the future. See, the past is like this. The present is down, the future is right there, but then think about it like this. What if there's a fourth option? Like, think about it, because history can be changed with a simple choice. And I know I'm gonna sound like a fanboy, but watch Chugga Conroy's Xenoblade Chronicles Let's Play. It's a great idea on that one too. Especially when it talks about, Shulk and how the way he has the power to see into the future and thus change the future. Thus talking about the possible outcome. See, what happens when people deal with outcomes? See, people have the power to change lives with one simple choice. But funny enough, people abuse that power unknowingly, and yet they don't know that. They don't know it has severe consequences. They don't know that it has real power. And especially when you're dealing with people who don't even know themselves. And I know I went off on a tangent about, Europe's, dark ages. And, during the time, they were scared of people who were in power, who would abuse the word so they can have their own way. I mean, look at the Crusades for an example. And some of you may say, what are you trying to do, bash Christianity? I'm like, no. But you have to look at the facts. Especially when you look at the Crusades and how the way, bishops, preachers, kings, people who are in power abuse their power so they can have a mindless people, or aka, how the way zombies would be looked at as mindless people. That's how zombies work. They don't think for themselves. They follow like a collective hive. See, now, how does this tie in with the Crusades, and how does this tie in thus with history? See, look, if you look at history, and if you look at how the way history was used, and it has been used to be changed, taken away, rewritten, and thus able to control people, you will realize that, hey, this is happening also now. And now let's get back on with the Crusades and how the way there were corrupt bishops that would say you will gain absolute acceptance into heaven if you reclaim the Holy Land of Jerusalem. Now, some of you may want to correct me if I'm wrong, and I appreciate it if you correct me on my history, because, I learned this back then in high school. But, when you look at history, and if you look at the Crusades and how the way people abuse their power to get certain things that they want, like land, resources, and especially acquisition to a new way of life. But you have to manipulate people in order to do so. And thus many lives were scarred, killed, and definitely maimed. But then how does this tie in with today's times? Especially when people are afraid to look at the truth, and the truth is often a mystery. See, and it's just like stepping outside of your comfort zone. And I know that from firsthand experience that stepping out of your comfort zone is not exactly it's not exactly, comfortable, for a lack of better words. But if you think about it, it kind of does deal with, how the way you step out of your way to do something new. But you have to do it with an accepting lens. Because if you don't, then eventually you'll just fall. And just like what was said before me, I believe it was Minister Malcolm, and it was, Minister Malcolm X. He's a beautiful man, and don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that because of his, charisma and the fact that he at least did something. Like I call Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King, all my people were beautiful. But the reason why I'm going to mention Malcolm X is this quote. And this is what he said: if you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. And now, how does this tie in with history? Because people, if you notice throughout history, people stood for nothing. The only time they stood up when there was absolute corruption and they realized that there was an obvious threat. But until then, it was considered to be too late because the threat was already there and they were already taken over. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give up. Then, especially when there are false prophets. See, false prophets, they don't need to. Some of them do look like pastors, some of them do look like sleazy businessmen, but some of them look like, so-called righteous activists. Some of them look like the everyday person. They may talk good game, but yet deep down inside they know they're not good game. And the real funny part is the fact that when you look at people like that, you gotta look at them with a lens of concern, because you're just like, wait a minute. Does this person have a delusion of grandeur, or do they know exactly what the hell they're doing? And how does this tie in with history? Especially when history is a circle, because you have to look back to find out what is wrong now, as opposed to just look at it as a straight line. Because if you notice, tacticians look at what happened back then. They think before they act. Now, take that to a grander scale, especially when it comes to building a civilization. You have to think about how would I want my people to thrive? Do I want them to take over other lands? Or do I want them to stay and cultivate the land? Or do we want to be a nomadic people? See, they think before they act. And sometimes they think with their gut instinct. Hey, who hasn't? But, all jokes aside, and, all the stuff aside, but I gotta talk about this because, when it comes right down to history, it seems as if people are scared to look at history because they are scared of the bloodshed. They are scared of what happened to those people. They are scared of the fact that there were many people being murdered, women being raped, children being killed, burnt at the stake, boiled in oil, tarred and feathered, alimony troubles, and all that crap. And then you look at it and you say, damn, why would I want to learn about history? This whole stuff is bloody. But you have to look at it and say, look, this will happen. But at the same time, if you let fear cripple you, then you become the very same thing that allows evil to go. Good that doesn't do anything. And if you look at throughout history, there were many good people who did nothing except live on their knees instead of died on their feet. And those who died on their feet are often heroes. Because they said, you know what? Enough is enough. I'd rather do what is right and die than to stand here and live as a villain that a few select people are willing to let me be as. And there's also a history of corrupt regimes being put in by so-called good, good liberal, also not even liberal, just like good so-called Samaritan countries, namely you, America. And some of you may say, why would you call out America for? I mean, come on. I mean, it's a part of a corrupt regime itself. I mean, if you look at its history, it doesn't exactly have the prettiest history. I mean, hey, the Glorious Revolution was the only revolution that really didn't have any blood in it. Because nobody really got hurt, nobody got killed, not a single bloodshed was dropped. Maybe there might have been some bruises, but nobody got hurt. Yet, you know, when you forget about your own history and you forget about what comes with it, you oftentimes repeat it. That's the problem with the prideful man. He oftentimes think that, oh, I'm invincible. I think I'm impervious. I'm Superman. Da, 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 da. And even then, Superman has a weakness. He's weak to magic, and he's weak to rocks. Hmm. Sounds like a sounds like he's a superstitious Christian. No, I'm just gonna stop. Don't worry. Yeah, there's some parallels here and there, man. Especially, like he's weak to magic, weak to rocks, and all that crap. Just like, some people are superstitious. But, at the same time, if you look at history and you look at how the way history oftentimes repeat itself, especially in today's time, you will realize that, hey, oh shit, this looks so familiar. Looking back at the war on drugs, and I remember this from, Planet Rock, the story of hip hop and the crack generation. Watch that documentary. One of the people said, what war on drugs? We're not going to finish on the war on drugs because it's just like raking leaves on a windy day. You're not going to get things done. And I said, crap, that is true. Because essentially, did you know that the war on drugs is still going on to this very day? I mean, sure, things have settled down a bit, but there is still a war going out there. And I remember this, you know, from a movie. But yeah, they show little to no evidence of showing it on TV, and it's called Panther. Watch that too. And Mario Van Peebles, acting as a panther, said this. They say there's a war on drugs, but all I see is a war on black people. They say there's a war on terror, but all I see is a war on black people. And I said, oh shit, he's right. But, all that stuff, man. Some of you may say, I thought you said this was not going to include race. I said it's going to have some form of it in it, but it's not going to be talked about in a broader scale. Especially when, if you know America's history, you obviously know what the hell happened. And people are afraid to talk about it, like, God damn, nobody wants to talk about American history. Why anybody want to talk about it? Simple, because they oftentimes repeat it themselves unknowingly. And the real funny and the kicker part is, the fact that, people oftentimes jump the gun before they often do their research. And then when you look at it, people tend to follow what the crowd does. And if they decide to do something different, or if they look at as if they're, very much as like what they do with the witch hunts, they'll be looked at as crooks, looked at with paranoia. And oftentimes when people are involved in paranoia, they don't think straight. And sometimes they will follow the crowd so they can feel safe. When oftentimes the crowd is unpredictable. And those who rule the crowd are unpredictable themselves. And what I find absolutely stunning is the fact that it didn't change from Middle Ages and it changed from ancient times because we're still doing the same damn things now. And, man, and if you live in a misogynist or a chauvinistic, era, in a chauvinistic, place, country, continent, you realize that there are certain rules right there that will have to be overthrown. But the problem is, who will be with you? You can be by yourself, but ultimately, reality shows that in order for change to happen, you have to be unified. And funny enough, I'm going to be straight up honest with you, man. As much as I hear about feminists talking about, oh yeah, men shouldn't do this, men shouldn't do that, men should let go of their egos. But you gotta remember, there are also women who are oftentimes clashing with feminists. Sure, feminists are considered to be, a bit, how should I say, radical, Like some of their ideas are pretty cool because they want to be equal to men, which I respect. But there are some feminists who are oftentimes, so off on the deep end that they don't even know what equality is. They want to be superior. Hey, in chauvinists, same thing. Like there are men who want to be equal to women, have the same opinion as women, but they are so far off on the deep end that they think they're superior to women. But oftentimes, if you look at history, sometimes people who want to be in power often feel inferior to themselves because they don't know what it's like to be powerful. Thus, they don't know the responsibility. See, let me put it like this: feminists, if you're out there, shit, if you want to be equal, then cool, you want to be equal. Chauvinists, if you want to be equal to men, if you want to be equal to women, then just be equal. Just look at what sides and what similarities do you have in common. You can respect the similarities, but understand the differences. That's the thing. And besides, being a chauvinist and being a feminist, I'm going to be honest with you, man, they're just titles to an inferiority complex. I'm just going to be honest with you. And some of you may say, like, that's not cool. Don't say that. Some people take high offense to it. But, when you really look at it and you look at their actions, especially when there are friendly people who say, hey, how you doing? I understand this world can be a bit crooked. And I'm going to be honest with you, man. I'm not going to overlook that because it is true. But at the same time, if you don't look at what is very the same, what is so much the same, we all breathe, we all live, we all die. Rich people actually think they are the shit until somebody puts a bullet in their head. And some of you may say, like, whoa, that's a bit extreme. But just hear me out. I mean, oftentimes when you look at rich people, some of them say, like, oh yes, I'm top the king. I'm like the world man. Everybody should listen to me. I got all the money. Ooh. And I look at rich people like this. Okay, strip everything that you have, everything that you own, every asset, everything, man. I bet you $1 you be struggling just like us. And I would laugh my ass. You'd be like, man, I can't man the cash register. What are all these peasants doing here? I feel so scared. I'm like, man, really? You can't handle a cash register? I'll be like, yo, judge, you see this fool right here talking about he can't man the cash register? They'd be like, yeah, man. I'm like, yo, Craig. He's like, what, man? I know, that's messed up. He's like, yeah, they count what's going on. He'd be like, yo, man, look at this fool right here trying to talk about he can't man the cash register. Yeah, he can, no problem. Yeah, he's talking about he can't do shit. Oh, man, that's so funny, man. I know. Man. And in history, you gotta also look at the positives, too. People, heroes, especially those who died on their feet, and especially when those who use their gifts for good, they oftentimes get a positive result. But at the same time, I've been focused on the negatives and how the way history tends to repeat itself in a negative perspective. But at the same time, history also deals with a positive note, especially when you look at the heroes, all the people who died, who struggled, who also said, you know what, man, I may have a lot of people going against me, but I'd rather stand on my principles. And if you stand on your principles, you will fall for nothing. And that's the beautiful thing, because heroes stand on their principles. Not heroes with ulterior motives. I mean heroes who stand on their principles, meaning that they are honest with who they are. And the beautiful part is the fact that, when you look at heroes, and you look at people who use their gifts of positivity, who even say, hey, I admit, I used to be a bit screwed up, but at the same time, that doesn't stop me from doing what the hell I do. And I say, you know what, man? Right on. Don't let anybody stop you. That's the brilliant side of history. You can repeat those motives because it will show you what you can do to progress yourself. But learn what happened that made them fall in the first place. And that's the cool part. And with that, YouTube, I say this is Broman Clash right here. And I say I won. And I hope y'all have a great day or a snow day for whatever reason y'all dealing with. I say later out. Later.